Oh, and I assume kind of same roles. I'm going to do the intro and we'll
Sure.
round the table. Yep. Brilliant. Okay. I have to actually say more clearly what the hell we do is what I was thinking last time.
I think you should put this bit in the podcast too, because I think this, shows that we're real people. And
Fair enough. Alrighty, so welcome to Information Revolution, which is a podcast for people interested in information, where we discuss how things are changing and maybe what needs to change. So I'm Michael Upton. I'm a director of Metataxis New Zealand, a consultancy in Wellington, and my background's in digital information management.
And I'm Judi Vernau. I'm an information architect, and I'm also a director of Metataxis.
And I'm Karl Melrose. I work for Leadership Through Data. I run business development and consulting for Australia and New Zealand.
Nice one.
What are we here to talk about today, Michael?
So today's topic, following on from last time when we were talking about what you've got and doing a stock take, is basically what you might do next with that. So what could you do with an information stock take?
Well, I mean, for me, I might as well kick off. We write a lot of policy in information and records management, but how do we actually know if it's being effective? And, I think a lot of what we talk about in information management comes down to how do we get information to tell us whether we're having results? I mean, that's what governance is. That's what all of the management reporting that people are asking for is. And, the information stock take can be one of those things that tells us whether we're being effective or not. And, obviously, if we're not being effective, part of strategy setting should be how we become more effective. And so I think by having the information stock take to say, right, we've got a policy that says people are supposed to put all this stuff over here, but we found huge pockets of it here, we can start to go and say, why is that? And start to figure out exactly what's gone wrong in the program so far so that hopefully we can address it, into the future. So for me, great.
You're thinking of the stock take as a testing what we've agreed rather than a setting the strategy up front?
Well, but both. But, I mean, there's if you've come into a new organisation and there's a set of policies in place, if those policies are delivering to all of the organisational needs and they're effective, why would you change them? But if you come into an organisation and the policy all looks right, but then you do an information stock take and you find that it's, it's achieving a tiny rate of effectiveness, then, you've got a problem to address. And I think that's it really, is your... I guess there's a couple of strategic questions, is your strategy setting going to be about righting the ship, or is it going to be about, streamlining it and making it faster and better? And I think that an information asset register, information stock take, whatever the name we use is, we will not have that argument again. But I think it gives you a tool that you can use to say how effective your past strategy has been, whether it was yours or someone else's, and then you can set future strategy in that context. I'm sure there's about 14 sayings about continuing to do something that has someone help me with a saying. I know there's one of them. Madness is continuing to do the same thing and expect different results or something like that.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
So I think it can be it's like that canary in the coal mine type thing. About telling you whether it's what's been done in the past is effective. And of course, I think we touched on it last time. It's the kind of thing that I think you should update it. There should be an update frequency to it. How long does it take before that information asset register is out of date? And I mean, obviously there's a big resource commitment. But, if you've got a strategy in place and it's got policy in it about where information should be stored, well, how do you know if your strategy is effective, and how can you measure it and go back to your management and say, we set the objective of having all of our high risk information in controlled repositories, by the end of the year, and either A, we've succeeded in that, or B, we've succeeded, we've hit 80% of our, goal, and here are the problem areas, and now we're going to build a strategy to address those problem areas. And, I mean, if you're going to bring an audit firm in to audit you, which, I mean, there's a local information manager who's on this sort of path at the moment, and the end of his 5-year program, which was really about righting the ship. It was they had information management that wasn't very effective, and the end goal of his program is an external audit. And so they'll bring an external auditor in to say, right, how effective is your information management policy? And I think that the stocktake is one of those tools that, I mean, that auditor is going to have to do something like that anyway. So that's, that for me, that's a large portion of it.
Yeah, I don't think I'd really thought about using it to reflect back in that way. But I think that's really, really good and really useful, because if you can do it at the start out of your strategy setting, if you have the, shall I say, luxury of doing that, then you should know where everything is. And then, exactly as you say, you can test that out. You've got actual facts and figures for testing that out further down the line, which is fantastic. And not many people make themselves that opportunity to do that. So, and also there are increasing numbers of tools around that help you to do quite a bit of that fairly easily now. Just the quantitative types of stuff rather than the qualitative.
I mean, are you comfortable talking about some of those tools? Because I've always done, like I said last time, I've always done this stuff the manual way, and I just, I think it would be great for people to just know some of the tools they could go and have a look at, if we're comfortable talking about specific tools.
I haven't used that many myself. I've tended to use either Tree Size, which is really cheap but actually does the job pretty well, or SolarWinds, which is not, I'm not sure how much it costs, to be honest, but does some really nice reporting about what's where, what kind of thing it is, and you can categorize stuff to help you understand what it is you've got. Those are the two that I'm familiar with, but I'm sure there are lots of others.
Okay.
I know other folks in Metataxis have used tools that include being able to rope in the sort of storage of cloud solutions to basically do that kind of quantitative stock take for things that are not just shared drives, which I thought sounded really powerful. I can't remember the name, but it's worth. I guess if people listening to this want to know, then we could go and have a little sniff.
I think Active Navigation does some of that too, I believe. I think Active Navigation does some of that. But other tools are also available, we're not particularly
we're not getting
recommending
kickbacks.
any of these.
No, but I mean, might be an interesting thing for people who are watching or listening as well. I mean, if you can put some comments in about tools that you've used that have been effective, that might actually be really valuable for lots of people.
Yeah,
because I don't think it's something that, if it's a tool that you use once a year, or, you do an information, or you're about to do your first information asset register. I mean, like everybody seems to be at the moment, it seems to be something that everyone's thinking about or doing. Then
that's really true. Yeah, I've been coming across that a lot lately.
And I think I'll just emphasize that idea that, the kinds of tools that we've talked about are really focused on what you're doing with shared drives full of documents, traditionally, or something that you can kind of expose to the tool as a drive. And that really to be thinking strategically about the information in the organization. Once again, you have to be format agnostic. And so you have to be thinking about data. You have to be thinking about what's sitting in business systems. And one of those strategic directions might be, we can streamline by putting things into tools that actually sort of drive the collection and maintenance of records, So just wanted to point that out, that, you might have to think about what tools are available to kind of quantify what's happening in those systems.
And even just doing some SharePoint reports, for example, to find out that you've actually now got 9,000 SharePoint sites and 8,500 of them haven't been looked at for the last 2 years. That kind of stuff is quite useful,
I
and
have
should
a
tell you
strange
quite a
feeling
lot.
that happens sometimes.
Well, I mean that's. I mean, it's good, right? It can tell you you've got a policy problem. I
Yes,
guess that's
exactly what you're saying, Carl. Yeah.
The reason the reason I'm bullish on the automated tools is exactly that. I just there's so much. The weakness of the manual stock take, is that people don't know what they don't know. And if they don't use it and they've never used it, they don't know it's there. And I just feel like so much must fall into that bucket and we must be so blind to it. And, I think it would be interesting as well to start looking at some of the other, ways you can see what people are using. Like, next generation firewalls and those sorts of things, that they... If you've got any kind of blocking service that you've got, they generally have a cloud storage category. And if you haven't blocked access to cloud storage, because that's, often just impractical, what they can do is often give you audit, sort of audit type data that will tell you, which users are going to which services and how frequently. And I think they're some of the things that they can present those big pockets of risk that I don't think we're necessarily aware of, and that sometimes it's people deliberately trying to do things that they shouldn't be doing. But I've worked with enough councils who were trying to do DAs 5 or 6 years ago to know that there were lots of councils where half a dozen people in the DA team had a Dropbox account that was under their council, it was the free Dropbox account, but it was under their council email address because they just couldn't figure out any other way to, send a 200 megabyte package of approved plans back to someone, unless they were going to print them and send them. And, I think picking up those things so that you can also start to say, not just we have, we have all these pockets of information here, but we actually have an information service gap that's causing people to go and use this tool. I think that stuff's really important.
Absolutely. Karl, just to confirm, DA in that context?
Sorry, development application, New Zealand, you call them building permits. I think, I'm sure they're called something else in, other places, planning permits, but if you want to renovate your house or renovate or build a building somewhere, it's the process you go through with an authority of some kind to get that construction approved.
Sure. We'd normally call it a building consent, I think.
Building consent.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. As you'll know, it's normally a disposal authority for the kind of records management in New Zealand. So important. That's why I wanted to just clarify that one.
It was a very, very good pickup. Good pickup.
What would records managers say about using abbreviations? Anyway, So, Judi, did you have a thought about what you would use this stocktake to do?
Well, I think I was saying last time that there's no way that you can plan for your new world unless you clearly understand what the old world looks like, which fits in, I think, again with what Karl's saying too. So if you're planning to bring in a new system, then even if you're not going to bring everything across, at least you get some sense of what there is, what kind of things you're going to need. And if you haven't done that stocktake, I love this word now, stocktake, then you can't properly understand how to design your new environment. That's certainly my view. Of course, if you are bringing stuff across, then it's even more important because you've got to work out how to fit this old stuff over here that's lying around in in shared drives or whatever it is, databases and so on. You've got to understand that in order to know how to bring it across, what needs to happen to it. You need to, as I'm always telling students, you need to understand each individual set of information actually if you're going to bring it across, because you might need to do something different with each set. From, we've got these DVDs in a filing cabinet over here. We want to bring them into the new world. So what does that mean? To we've got a set of paper contracts over here, but we're not doing paper anymore. So what needs to happen to them? To well, we've got this stuff nicely in SharePoint over here, but it needs to go into the new world. And actually, we really don't want, we want to bring all our contracts together in future. Whereas before, each team managed its own contracts, for example. But you've got to know that in order to know what the new world needs to look like. You need to understand what those sets are, what those important groupings of content are, so that you can plan for that in the new world.
For sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, go on, Karl.
No, I was just going to say. I mean, the thing that was popping out for me when you were talking is, machinery of government changes. Where the number of small authorities I've been into that were once part of a department, and then they were spun out as their own statutory authority, or the other way around. Or I was talking to a friend of mine at an agency earlier in the week, and they've got to move 5 parts of their department out into other agencies, and they've got 1 new function coming in. And all the decisions that you've got to make about first, how do you actually package that content up and move it? But I keep going to agencies and finding that they've just drawn a line in the sand and gone, it's too hard to figure out how to make that old structure work with our new organization. So in one organization, pre-2015, specific date, it's that structure. Post-2015, it's our new structure. I think that stuff's hard and important.
Yeah. And I've had a recent client who actually didn't realize they still had hundreds of thousands of files from an agent from a domain that went to a new agency. And it was only when we did the whole tree size thing and they went, oh my God, we've got all that stuff there. We don't need to have that anymore.
And was it duplicated?
It was, because
okay.
all of those records, had gone off to the new agency, not the responsibility of the old agency.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, I mean, so what was on my mind thinking about what you can do with the stocktake was really comes back to, or I can kind of tie it into some of the threads of what you've both been saying, which is that I think there's a real opportunity to actually look at process improvement, which is not normally thought of as being a part of the information world, because we're normally focused on the kind of, the assets or the things, the files, the documents, whatever, the records. And I think fundamentally, there's a hopefully really obvious connection between business processes and information. Like information is either going to be an input to a process, I need to know these facts so that then I can get on with what I'm doing, or it's going to be an output. We've collected up this thing, we've made this decision, and we're going to capture some information about what happened there. And you can get more detailed, but basically you've got ins and outs of processes, and processes transform or enhance or add to, sets of information. And so in that example, I think, Judi, you floated the idea of, you might have a thing where different teams are managing contracts separately. And so in the course of a stocktake, you're identifying something that's not just about the information, but it's actually about a way of working. It's actually saying, okay, these folks are, I was going to say something extra rude, let's say faffing about with, with separate sort of management systems, like solutions for how they're going to look after a type of information. And what are you seeing in an information stocktake that's kind of classic in that regard? You're seeing something about risk, like there is a risk that information will be lost because it's being, fragmented in the way that it's being held. And you're seeing something about value as well. You're going, look, they've got things that really matter to us. Contracts matter because we need to be in a reliable position to, get services, deliver services, whatever. So, stocktakes typically are very focused on, what's the risk profile versus what's the value profile, and then what action do we want to take based on that combination, like, really high risk, really low value because it's a duplicate. Okay, let's chuck it out. Really low risk, really high value. Perhaps we just need to maintain the status quo, but coming back, like my big thing with thinking about the sort of opportunities in stock takes is that idea of basically tying your information to the work that's being done, so that you can then go, okay, these are the processes that could benefit from better information management. So the real, the thing I love about this is when you frame it that way, like basically what can benefit from better information management, it's really obviously part of our sort of remit, if you like, professionally. So it's not sort of doing something weird at all. It's just sort of like, hey,
Not
this is actually
at all,
the kind of thing
because this is
we should be doing.
This is what government does, actually. I mean, government isn't digging up the road. It's they've got contractors to do that. Usually. But what we are doing in government, if I can talk about government primarily here rather than other organisations, is creating and sharing information. That's what we do, actually. We do it in certain domains, but what we're doing is processing information. That's our business. That's our actual business in pursuit of particular aims. So we've got to manage it properly. And I think if people thought about it in that way a bit more, it would actually really help. Like,
yeah, sure.
I was talking to a friend of mine at an agency here in South Australia that one of the things they do is manage mining claims. Completely an information business, and they know they are completely an information business. They take information management really seriously as a result, because they know it's the thing for the agency.
Yeah, I find it interesting if you ever work with or talk to utilities companies, people dealing with,
I've worked with,
infrastructure, energy, and so on. Like, they talk about document control and document controllers and all that yang, but it's a flavor of managing information, 100%.
Yes.
What happens when things go wrong? Generally people die, or assets completely fall over in terms of physical infrastructure. Like, basically, if you get the information wrong, the stakes are very high. And so those kinds of lines of business are fascinating for me when it comes to thinking about information management, because they never have any kind of fight about asserting their value or why they're there. It's like, we know we don't want.
No, if you want to restart your 250 megawatt power station, there's a procedure for that, and you know what? It's a lot of steps, and if we don't have the documentation for that, and the power station goes out, that's going to be a really bad day.
And it really comes back to real fundamentals of like what we're trying to enforce as well. Not enforce, but like drive, which is like basically access to that information, currency of that information, sort of reliability, findability, like all of those concepts that we might push either in terms of benefits of information architecture or with information management more generally. Like, they all matter in that circumstance, right? You don't want the wrong procedure. You don't want to not find the procedure.
Yeah.
You don't want ambiguity about which procedure is the right one because you've got 7 copies, So all of those kinds of practices that we would push, they're all present there, and their value is really well understood.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me that I've heard people talk about procedures as if they are people doing things rather than people managing the information around things.
Right.
If you see what I mean. Yeah. So the people are really important and the procedures are really important, but the information not so much, is the kind of feeling that you get. Whereas actually it is exactly what you've just said about that whole flow of the information through the organisation. That's the critical thing. It's the water that feeds everything as it goes through.
Yeah.
But I mean, this stuff is connected to real world outcomes too. That's the thing that I think. I feel like it's a feature of bureaucratic organisations that, the process is chipped into so many different parts that I think often people are working in the process and they don't feel like they're connected to the end result. And I feel like, separating information management from, just good management, I think is one of the things that's really taken us away from feeling like we're connected to, feeling like first that we are connected to producing good outcomes for people and being able to really tightly connect that. But also having managers feel like they're really tightly connected, the way they manage their information is really tightly connected to the outcomes they're able to provide for whoever they have to provide it for.
Yeah. Really good point.
Nice. And I think that probably brings us to about time. So I think that's a good spot to wrap up for this round.
Okay, more of this anon, eh, Michael?
Yeah, sounds
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks for listening, one and all. Catch you soon.
Cheers.
See ya.